Hello, everyone. I'm Yanya Kellick, Senior Editor with the Epoch Times. We're absolutely thrilled to have this collaboration with the America's Future series, the National Security C.L.A.S.S Summit. We're going to do an American Thought Leaders episode here live to you as part of the America's Future series. And I'm absolutely thrilled here to have Fengsou Zhou, one of the leaders of the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, here to discuss.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor.
So let's jump right into it. There was this National People's Congress summit. There's been Xi Jinping has now in his third term. This is unprecedented in Chinese history. And there were even some theatrics in the hall, which we know were deeply choreographed as things work at the NPC. Why don't you tell us what you think happened over there?
I think what is clear is that Xi Jinping has consolidated his power, that was demonstrated at the end of the meeting, with the humiliation of the previous leader, Hu Jintao, on stage, removed definitely by force against his will. We don't really know the reason, but it's a great signal that now Xi Jinping is only one person who has absolute power over this party and the country. But Hu himself was not a reformer by far. He made his name in 1989 because of his crackdown in Tibet. That's how he was promoted, handpicked by Deng Xiaoping, the butcher of Tiananmen, to be, the next leader after Jiang Zemin. So, I think what's important is that what happened today is not just Xi Jinping, his personal ambition. It is a trajectory that was set from 33 years ago when tanks rode on Tiananmen Square to kill innocent people who are calling for freedom and democracy in China. And that's a challenge for China's future as well, and we must confront it as a center issue for foreign policy against communist China. And we cannot avoid it like we did for most part of last 33 years.
Well, that's really interesting. I actually want to dig into that, right? There was a precedent set in terms of how the West responded to Tiananmen Square. I want to talk about that. But before we go there, you were actually there. And just tell us about that moment when you realized that the tanks were coming, that the CCP was actually going to, do this dirty work.
I was there during the whole night of June 3rd, and I was the last one to leave in the morning of June 4th. It was like a war zone. Tiananmen Square was at the center, and we were protected by Beijing citizens from all directions, and the troops were pushing in with machine guns, tanks. We are hearing gunshots from every direction, and the flares, military flares, lighting up the sky. It was like a war, and later we knew that about 250,000 troops were deployed in this massacre, and unknown number of people, probably in thousands, were killed. Even today, that remained a secret. I was really shocked at that time. I couldn't believe this was happening while the world was watching, and it's happening in the capital city of Beijing. For me, that was the beginning of my journey as an activist. And to date, I'm still proud of my role as a student in this protest.
So, a little bit more from history. After the massacre, you actually made it to America, but there was a few steps for you to get there.
After the massacre, I was number 5 on the most wanted list of 21 student leaders. For me, that was a shock. That was also a source of pride because this was the most inspiring experience for me as a Chinese to witness such hope such devotion from so many people. It was like a volcano eruption, so spectacular, but it ended so tragically. I see it as my duty to carry on as a survivor.
Well, so now let's jump back to, the way the West responded to this. There were some people, some leaders that expressed that they had some issue with what was going on. We know that behind the scenes, George Bush kind of said, well, actually, let's keep relations going as usual. We know we have that information now. But in general, pretty quickly, there seemed to be little actual serious response to such a terrible event from the rest of the world.
Right. I think the Deng Xiaoping and the communist government, they were very afraid at that time. But President Bush gave what he needed. Like within a month of the massacre, he sent a special envoy to Beijing to tell Deng that he was just doing a show. They wouldn't cut off China, and that's what gave a much-needed lifeline to this monster who survived and thrived today with the help of American technology and the free trade that has hurt America for the last 33 years.
And when you say monster, are you talking about the Chinese Communist Party?
Oh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a monster that thrives on fear and violence, and it has no regard for human life. And that, I think, was manifested on Tiananmen Square. But the United States didn't do what it should do. Instead, such a regime was embraced and given the most favored nation treated for trade and later allowed to enter WTO. And especially now with global reach of digital technology, they are even forcing multinationals like Facebook, like Zoom, like LinkedIn, to follow their orders. I was censored on LinkedIn. We were censored on Zoom and many other places because this is a message that Beijing doesn't like, the message of freedom for China. And that's what we are fighting against. So at that time, we were all hoping that technology and the free trade will change communist regime. But now it's the other way. They are changing the world, and there's no going back. Xi Jinping is their best person for this expansion globally. That's why they have this policy on Taiwan. That's why they have this One Belt, One Road initiative. That's why they are trying to control technology.
So you would think, right, we've been in the middle of the COVID pandemic for a number of years now. And we saw how the Chinese regime essentially one way or another weaponized this virus, let it out into the world, while locking down internally to try to stop it. You would think that the world would notice that this was a problem, but as far as I can tell, and I've been talked with a number of experts on this show and personally, people are telling me that foreign direct investment is increasing into China even as we speak, even after all of this, even after Tiananmen, even after the genocide documented by many, many entities in Xinjiang and possibly two others, Tibet and against the Falun Gong practitioners. How is this possible?
I think for now, unfortunately, United States has no restriction on investment in China, even in very key areas. I think the recent policy on semiconductor is a good initiative to cut off supplies from investment technology to China. But there are many areas, for example, artificial intelligence, big data, about technology that we are still supplying China with much needed power. Eventually, every trade with China done now with the help of this firewall that separates China from the world, basically enslaved Chinese people spiritually and morally, politically, is providing this regime with blood and with power to conquer the world. So that's where we must awaken and must confront the reality now. I'm glad that for the last few years, the policy has changed to the right direction, but there's a lot more to be done. I hope it's not too late.
Well, this is the question. Like, what would it take for there to be, the Pearl Harbor moment or the Sputnik moment, however you want to call it, that would help American society or Western society collectively understand this threat that you're describing?
I hope we will never see that kind of moment. I think we were talking about history and the strategy of communist China regime today. Pearl Harbor, that's actually in a way fortunate for America because it didn't really hurt United States fatally. But if in the future this happened to United States, we may not have such an opportunity to push back. That's what we are facing, because today China is top trading partner for probably most countries in the world, and in many areas it's very advanced. Not only in controlling people, but in, for example, hypersonic missiles. That's a combination of nuclear and space technology. It seems that they are even ahead of United States. Now, that's a kind of reality we must see clearly right now, and no delay.
There, of course, are lots of people in China that don't like what the regime is doing. Most recently, we saw this also kind of unprecedented because it was so public, what's been called the Bridge Man protest, right? There's big banners put up very explicitly criticizing Xi Jinping. And the guy very kind of, I guess, smartly kind of created this smoke that actually prevented people from taking them down too quickly. I mean, it was a very interesting and kind of sophisticated protest. Yes. So, I have the best person in front of me to tell me what's going on here and what the significance of this is.
This is an amazing story that the world has to know. The bridgeman, the tankman reincarnated after 33 years. And even the bridge itself has a deep connection because it's Sitong Bridge that was built by the company which was the most active company on Tiananmen Square in 1989. And I'm just glad that this bridge still exists. And what this guy, I think his name is probably Peng Lifa, he did was just truly amazing. Not only he created these spectacular protests, while the world was watching in the center of Beijing's political scene, while the meeting was going on, with all the high-tech surveillance cameras, and he could do it. It's so inspiring. He also has like a full-blown platform of his policy, that address the concerns of people. He wants democracy, he wants freedom, dignity, citizenship against the arbitrary confinement that's going on now, and the forced starvation of people. That's why his story quickly spread, even within China. There are many people who were arrested, I believe in the hundreds, simply for trying to spread his message. But still, his message was shown within 24 hours at a few miles just from where these CCP was having their meeting, and all over China, from the north, Heilongjiang, to the south, to Shenzhen, and people as young as high school students, they were spreading his message. And what's extraordinary also is that outside of China, this is the first time after Tiananmen protest that hundreds of universities have seen Chinese students protest, spreading his message. So this, to me, is the hope of China. This is the voice of people that was repressed for so many years now, and all of a sudden, it erupted in this person. Of course, where he's now, we don't really know. I hope more people would follow on his whereabouts, and we want the whole world to rally to his support every day. To me, he will be like the future representative or the future president, even though we have no connection with him. But his idea, his thinking, and the way he planned everything is exactly what we want. That's the citizen for a free democratic China, and people will win this over from communist regime. That's kind of hope that this guy ignites there.
Well, and it's kind of amazing, the ingenuity. We're of course talking about a technocratic totalitarian state that the Chinese Communist Party has created. All cell phone activity is monitored, text messages. It's very, very difficult to basically even communicate with the long arm of the regime studying everything you're doing, right? So I know that people have been using this airdrop, for example, on subways and so forth to surreptitiously pass on the message. Even in this climate, there's ways, and that I find that incredibly inspiring. But this is a crazy world, right? We're looking at everyone needs in these cities that are locked down needs their green pass updated every 2 days. They get charged for the tests they have to take. If their green pass isn't green, they can't do many things. They might not be able to work. And it's all basically digitally managed, AI controlled. It's a crazy dystopia we couldn't even imagine.
Right.
So why are they still locking down in all of this? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Because just like any dictators, they live in fear. They are fearful of people walking freely. And that's the main reason. They are fearful of losing control, losing their credibility. That's the main reason. But in China, what happens is that once Xi Jinping has made his demand, there's no turning back. And people would push to extreme. His underlings would use their power to brutalize people in many ways, just to show their loyalty to this one person. That's exactly what happened in Shanghai, the most prosperous city in the country, probably one of the most prosperous in the world. And people were starved to death. These are well-to-do, wealthy people. They are imprisoned in their own home with barbed wire and starved to death. And for that, Li Qiang, who was the mayor, who was the leader of the party in Shanghai, was promoted. Now he's the second-hand person to Xi Jinping. That was my prediction then. I said, the bad publicity, the outrage against Li Qiang will become his credit in the eye of Xi Jinping. That's exactly what happened. That's why this kind of policy could be implemented yeah, because of this mechanism, this perverse mechanism that rewards personal loyalty, you know, against people's well-being.
Well, and brutality, apparently, right?
Definitely, yeah, yeah. It's just very, I mean, it's just senseless, beyond the imagination. You know. We are seeing just recently, you know, there are such disasters in everywhere, in Xinjiang, you know, in Zhengzhou, in Tibet. You know, there were a mother and possibly his kid, you know, they fell off the building, crashed because he was so hungry. They didn't have food. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that's happening everywhere. But because of the digital totalitarianism, you know, we don't really see it every day. We only can have a glimpse of it from the brave people who broadcast the message. And that's the kind of model they want to have, not only in China, but in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and all over the world, because eventually it's their end goal to be the engineers of the souls of human being, every human being in the world. You know, that's explicit, you know, in the party's ideology.
So, you know, everything you're talking about now makes me understand better what happened at the consulate in Manchester when the protesters were basically outside peacefully protesting. The consulate people come out and basically, you know, brutalize them. Right. And then you have the consul on record basically saying, I'm proud of this. I mean, I'm embellishing it a little bit here, but he's basically saying, I'm proud of this, and now from what you're saying, this is because he's showing his loyalty and he's showing his brutality. It's kind of a chilling thought. So given all of this, okay, given everything we've just talked about, you know, we're gonna be closing up fairly soon. What is your advice to free world leaders in terms of engagement with China?
We must confront, delink, decouple business as usual. It cannot keep going. That's my advice. We must cut off China from key technologies, investments, and human capital. That's very important on every aspect. That's why I think the recent Semiconductor Act is a good model. We should follow up on that on many industries.
But there's still, you know, as we're speaking, there's still a huge push to put more money into China, even as we know there's all these structural problems in the economy. We know the housing market is sort of, you know, collapsing. We've got all sorts of evidence of that, but the CCP somehow still finds a way.
Well, they are masters of lies, and they are very skillful at buying off the elites of Western society. That's why, you know, we are keeping hearing this from the policy circle, you know, the appeasers who want to embrace such a brutal regime. And that's where we must change. We must confront this. You know, there's a Chinese saying that 饮鸩止渴, you know, drinking poison to quench your thirst, that may have some temporary effect, you know, for example, for inflation or environmental issues. But this is an existential enemy, yeah, that just thrives on violence and lie and controlling.
So we have just, you know, maybe half a minute left, and any final words for just, you know, the typical person that might be watching about how to approach this very difficult reality?
China without democratization cannot be a force of peace and prosperity in the world, and we must center in our policy around China's democratization. That's China's future.
Well, Fengsou, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And we'll send you back over to the American Future series.
Thank you.